the one thing we didn't get to cover, and another reason for hope, is that in this particular concession, the deforestation was so bad and the community organizing around it, so not just the Indigenous Dayak people, but local allies, uh, they campaigned and wrote to the government of Indonesia and asked them to step in to get the deforestation to stop. And actually, there was a letter sent from the government to the company telling them to stop clearing.
I'm Meg Carney, an outdoor and environmental journalist, and this is the Outdoor Minimalist podcast. Thank you for joining us so that together we can create a better outdoor space as we recreate. When most people think about recreational vehicles, RVs, campers, the like, they picture freedom, the open road, family vacations, maybe even a way of life. But what probably does not come to mind is deforestation in Borneo. Yet, half of all tropical plywood harvested globally ends up in RVs. That's why in episode 199 of the Outdoor Minimalist podcast, we dig into how the RV industry in the United States has become a major driver of rainforest destruction that threatens orangutan habitat, draining peatlands, and displacing Indigenous Dayak communities. Our guest, Amanda Hurowitz, is a senior director at Mighty Earth, and she walks us through her team's investigation into how one specific type of plywood from Indonesia makes its way into American RVs, and why it has been an industry secret for so long. Amanda leads Mighty Earth's Forest Commodities team, overseeing campaigns to protect forests and communities across Asia and Africa. She's helped drive transformative shifts in industries from cocoa to palm oil, and today she's working to bring the same pressures and solutions to the RV industry. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the Outdoor Minimalist podcast today. I'm excited to dive into a topic about the RV industry. It's not one that we get to talk about very often on the show, but it is definitely a big part of the outdoor industry. So to start, I think we'll just kind of dive right in to your investigation with Mighty Earth and what exactly led Mighty Earth as an organization to look into America's RV industry.
Thanks, Meg. It's really great to be here. And I have to say, we never intended to look into the RV industry. So we were trying to stop Indonesia's largest deforester. So in 2023, there was something like, I don't know, I think it's 50,000 acres of deforestation. So that's like 20,000 hectares of deforestation in a concession in West Kalimantan. And this was just like an enormous amount of deforestation. So deforestation in Indonesia recently has gone down. So thanks to pressure campaigns from consumers around the world, deforestation for palm oil, for pulp and paper, for rubber, from other commodities has really dramatically declined. And so this was an anomaly. Like, what is going on here? Why is there so much freaking deforestation happening? And so that's what got us interested first. So it was a concession owned by a company called Alas Kusuma, and the concession itself is called Mayawana Prasada. And we started investigating and trying to figure out how to get the deforestation to stop there. It was only when we were sort of tearing our hair out, figuring out how do we stop this? How do we find some leverage? That we realized a lot of the natural timber that they were cutting down before they'd plant eucalyptus or acacia was actually going to the recreational vehicle industry.
Wow, that's so interesting. So you kind of stumbled upon it as you were looking into some of your other causes that you advocate for. And so, can you explain, I guess, in as much detail as you want to provide, um, how then the RV industry directly is linked? Because obviously they're providing this timber to build things, but what are the direct links going on here?
Yeah, so maybe it's important to talk about a recreational vehicle and how it's built. So one, they want them to be as light as possible, which makes sense because you want to be able to actually not just have it sit in your driveway, but go and see really beautiful places around the country. And so they try to make them as light as possible. And so as part of the interior wall, there's a really thin piece of luan or meranti, used to be called Philippine mahogany, and it's just structural. And so it could be, replaced by aluminum, but the industry for years, we're talking since like the 1970s, has relied on this type of tropical hardwood plywood called luan. And so this is the species in Indonesia that's making its way. And so what happens is there's deforestation, the trees are cut down, they're sent to be processed. They put them on a lathe and they take these really thin strips, and then they sell them to importers in the US. We've identified a couple of them along with our partners Earthsite. And so one is Transindo, which is a small company in California, another MGB Wood Group. They're sold to another company called Patrick Industries, who makes a lot of the parts for RVs. And then it goes into RVs like Jayco, owned by Thor, Winnebago, all the different RVs that Forest River makes as well.
Well, yeah, so these are some very dominant brands in the industry that are using this type of plywood. And I mean, when you are looking specifically for kind of the sources of this deforestation, what does the process look like to trace back um, how the plywood is then being used from that specific forest? Like, I don't
Yeah,
understand, like, what is
yeah,
that?
yeah. How do
How
you
do you
figure
get
it
to
out?
that? How do you get to that point?
Okay, so a couple of things. So you look at like shipping records and company statements. You look at timber procurement documents. So in Indonesia, there's a system called SVKL. And so it's like timber registries. And so it's through the system that we learned that Mayawana Prasada was selling timber to a company called Forestama Raya. So it's through this registry, and you just sort of follow it. And then you look at the import documentation. There's like outfits called Panjiva that will give you trade data. And we realized that all of these shipments were going from Forestama Raya in Indonesia to Transindo. Forestama Raya, about 98% of its tropical hardwood was coming from Mayawana Prasada. So there's a small chance that, it's not coming from there. They have some other supplies, but it seemed like this supplier, at least in the years we were looking at, so much of its supply was coming from this concession, which makes sense given the amount of deforestation we saw. And so then we were able to, through these different, sometimes they're legal filings, sometimes there's this sort of like regulatory things you have to do, ship manifest, that sort of thing. You can follow the paper trail and follow it all the way, unfortunately, to the RV industry.
Yeah, that process is so interesting. And you mentioned that the industry's been using this type of plywood for quite some time. Has it always been coming from the same place, or has like the originating plywood kind of shifted around the world as the supply has changed?
Yeah, so Moranti or Luan, it's something the industry has relied on for years and years. I think this is a secret that most in the industry know, but anyone outside of the industry has no idea, in part because the wood itself is hidden. Like it's not something you can see. So if you talk with RV dealers and manufacturers, they're aware of this, but it's really this dirty secret. Those on the outside are just not aware. Um, and so they, uh, can you repeat the question? I was
That's
lost,
that's
lost
totally
where
fine.
you were going with that.
No, so I was just wondering so they've been using this for a very long time, but has it always originated in Indonesia, the source of that, or has it kind of moved around as the supply and demand has kind of shifted?
Yeah, so the industry has used it since at least the 1970s. Again, it's used in the interior, and so you can't really see it. So it's this dirty secret of the industry. Um, I believe they've been getting it from Indonesia, since that time. I think they've also gotten it from the Philippines. So, Southeast Asia, we could say more generally, is where this species is found. Some suppliers may use some other material out of Brazil, but it's definitely a tropical hardwood. I think the interesting thing that we're seeing is this type of plywood used to be used by U.S. home builders, but they're increasingly moving to alternatives. And so the largest consumer of tropical wood in the U.S. today is the recreational vehicle industry.
Wow. Okay, so We all know that deforestation is bad inherently. We don't want that. But with this type of timber harvesting, are there specific threats to the biodiversity loss or like specific wildlife, different types of habitats? What is most concerning about the use of this plywood and like the continued harvesting?
Yeah, so I can talk about this really important concession. So concession just means essentially like plantation area or an area that a company has been given some permission to do some agriculture in. And so it is huge, like ginormous, like I don't know, multiple times the size of LA. So really, really big concession in West Kalimantan, Indonesia. And one of the reasons we got interested in it is one, because there was so much clearing of forest. But two, it's a really, really special place. So one, it has peat. So peat is, how do we describe it? It's like a bog. So it has in it, because it's decomposed material, carbon and a lot of methane. And so when you cut down trees that are on peat, first what the companies do will dig canals in order to drain the peat. So I've traveled to this concession. I've traveled to this area. You walk and it's like squish, 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 squish. It's like 10 meters, like a really, really deep peat. It's really hard to walk through unless you're walking on a board. So when they drain the peat, unfortunately, the peat then has a tendency to catch on fire. And so all this methane is released. So it creates this huge carbon bomb. So really, really bad for the planet. So that's the first issue with deforestation, this concession. Second issue is it's orangutan habitat. Something like, let me see if I can find the figure. It's like 65% of this concession is officially recognized as orangutan habitat. And some of our partners have gone and done surveys and seen nest, 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 nest. So orangutans are clearly using the forest. This is their home. Talking with those who work with communities, and there's issues with community wildlife conflict. So what happens is when the concession comes in and clears the trees, the orangutans have nowhere to go. So then they go into community gardens and there's more human orangutan conflict. And so since Mayawana Prasada came in and started clearing, they've seen a huge increase in the number of incidents of orangutans going out into community gardens. But it's not just orangutans, it's forest cats and gibbons and hornbills and adorable sun bears. So this is a really, really rich place for wildlife. It is also indigenous land. And so that's the other piece. So, it's home to all of these amazing species of wildlife. It's also home to Indigenous Dayak people.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the different communities and then the indigenous involvement there. Like, what is the indigenous communities specifically? Let me phrase that way. What is their involvement in opposing this type of deforestation? I mean, I can't imagine that they're necessarily for it.
So, in this part of Borneo, the indigenous communities are known as Dayak people. And so many of them used to be nomadic, but have since settled down. And so one of these communities has settled down for about 3 generations now. And the forest is their home. Like I mean, I don't know any other way to say it. This is where they live. They obviously use the forest, but I had the honor to travel there last November with the New York Times journalists who were doing a story on this. And before we could go into the forest, we did a ceremony to ask for permission to do so. And so, yes, they use the forest. Yes, sometimes they cut down trees, but they do it in a way that is sustainable. They know that the forest is where their lives and livelihoods come from. And so, these community in particular, they have a sacred hill. It's called Sabar Bubu. And the company was coming very close to clearing that hill. And so this community came out night after night, week after week, to stand at the deforestation line to try to stop the deforestation from going up their sacred hill. They didn't fully succeed, but the company eventually stopped. And so when we went there, you see just, you know, deforestation, trees planted, monoculture agriculture as far as the eye can see. It's really, really quite desolate. The sun's beating down. We were lucky enough. after visiting with the community to actually go to the other side of that hill. So deforestation concession in the front goes halfway up this sacred hill. We went to the other side and Meg, it's this like beautiful, lush rainforest. Like you go in there and your blood pressure drops. Like it really is amazing. Like you get on a dirt motorbike, you go through some community rice fields, a little bit of smallholder palm, some rubber, and then you go into the forest. There's water. And so this community has clean water that I've bathed in. Like I can tell you it's clean because of this stream. And it is just like these ginormous tall trees. You can see while it is both, provides subsistence for them and is also a spiritual center.
Well, it's good to hear that they stopped at a certain point, I guess. It would have been nice for them to stop a little bit earlier. Um,
For sure.
but with all of the information and the investigation that you guys carried out, I mean, where do you go from there? Are there different forms of opposition that you've taken? Have you filed complaints in different capacities? And what does that process look like? And why does that matter?
Yeah. So one of the things we were able to do is file a complaint with the Forest Stewardship Council. So what Mayawana Prasada was doing and Alaska Suma was doing may or may not have been illegal, but because Alaska Suma, the parent company, had these certificates, there's something, this gets very technical, so stop me if I go down a rabbit hole here, but something called a policy of association, which is essentially like reputational risk. And so the Forest Stewardship Council does not like it when companies that hold certificates clear 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 hectares. That is not a good look for them. So you can file a complaint. And so with Mayawana Prasada, Alaska Suma, we've gone ahead and done that. We'll see what happens. The FSC is notoriously incredibly slow at addressing this. But if the complaint works the way it's supposed to, the company would then be responsible for restoring the damage they have done. So restoring both the land to the communities and also restoring the forest. And so that might mean damming some of these peat canals and re-wetting some of this area, or investing in biodiversity nearby.
Okay, so those complaints, they specifically are targeted towards the like lumber producers themselves. But what about the RV industry? Are they implicated in any capacity because they're the ones purchasing this, but they're not the ones harvesting this?
You got it exactly. And so that's really where we need to see change. So the RV industry has been sourcing tropical hardwood plywood for, years and years and years. The crazy thing, they have no sustainability policies when it comes to wood. Like literally none. Like we've looked on their websites. They say nothing about where they're getting their wood from. So they have no traceability and they have no policies about how to source this wood sustainably. I mean, this is crazy, like 2025. So to give you an example, Lowe's, Home Depot, they also sell some tropical hardwood plywoods. Each of them have policies. And so if Lowe's and Home Depot can have policies, so can the RV industry. The other thing they can do is actually to switch from using these Luan plywood materials, and instead, I'm going to show this to you. You may not be able to see this if you're on a podcast, but can use composite materials. There's an outfit called Asdel that makes something like this, but a bunch of different other RV companies do as well. They don't need to use Luan. They use it because it's cheap. They can use something that's a tiny bit more expensive, but that won't destroy the habitats of orangutans.
Do you think that we would ever see the RV industry making this change independently, or would we need pressures from like regulations, policy changes, things like that?
Well, they haven't really changed since the 1970s. But I think it's in part because no one has really asked them to. They've never been exposed. Like no one has made this link in this way. We got a story on the front page of the New York Times, so that's good. That's like a good first step. Um, I think the industry will continue to be resistant. So some of the RV manufacturers, so there's a company called Ember, and then there's another, I think called Berkeley. But let me hold on. Let me Brinkley. So Ember and Brinkley, most of their RVs do not use Luan or Meranti. Most of them are using these composite materials. So Ember, maybe uses a little bit. So these companies, like these companies can switch. There are alternatives. I think you have to use the materials a little differently. They need some more glue to make sure they don't, the adhesion. So there's a little bit of a learning curve. But the alternative is destroying homes of orangutans and indigenous people. And so the industry can switch. It just needs some pressure. Like someone just needs to ask them to.
Yeah, and where should that pressure come from? Or I guess not phrasing it in that way, but I mean, a lot of people use RVs, especially I would say our predominant listenership is in North America. That's a huge RV kind of like mecca. People use them all of the time. A lot of homes just have one. So if people are RV owners or people like embedded in this industry in any capacity, what can they be doing to hopefully apply pressure that would help with the shift?
Yeah, and I should be clear, we love RVs and RV owners. We love the idea of seeing America's great, vast natural beauty. Our hope, though, is that they don't inadvertently destroy these beautiful places in Indonesia or elsewhere. So what can people do? There is a petition we have online, so you can sign the petition. I know that doesn't always feel like the most impactful thing to do, but it's a really good first step. And if we can show that more and more people and more RV owners demand change, I think the next thing to do is to, ask your dealer, ask, people who are in the industry that so whoever you bought your RV from, if someone is helping you fix it up. I mean, we need this chatter to make it through the supply chain to get to the decision makers. These are also publicly traded companies for the most part. So if you or your mutual fund own shares in these companies, they should be asking questions. I mean, I think, happy to give people my email address if you want to get more involved. I'm Amanda@mightyearth.org, but happy to give you the names of, the CEOs of these companies. I think really like on Facebook, all sorts of forums. This has been a dirty secret of the industry for so long. What we need now is public pressure in all the ways that public pressure can come about to be asking questions. And again, the solutions are pretty straightforward. So they need sustainability standards, and they need to come up with some plans to move away from using Meranti or Luan to begin with.
And I'll be sure to share the link to your petition as well as your email address and everything in the show notes so people can find that very easily there. But I guess to close out, looking forward, what is something that is giving you hope right now? Because that can be a hard thing to find in the current climate, regardless of what we're discussing, but specifically revolving around deforestation and this destructive cycle that like consumerism has had us fall into.
Yeah, Meg, it's a really good question, and I think a really important one. And so the first thing I would say is this story we're talking about really is now an outlier. 15, 20 years ago, this was the norm. Like orangutan habitat, peat, indigenous community being stolen, like that's just what happened. And consumer pressure was able to change that. Deforestation for palm oil is down something like 90%. That's a huge shift. And so we can do that. We now just need to do that for the RV industry. So it really is possible, but it takes some public pressure to actually make it happen.
Awesome. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, like that you feel like we missed or anything in there?
I mean,
I feel like you're
there's
very thorough. It's a lot to cover. I know.
yeah, I hope that was, yeah, it was clear because there's a lot of threads. I would say we did not think that uncovering the largest deforester in Indonesia would lead us to the recreational vehicle industry. So I hope all of the threads were clear. I would say the one thing we didn't get to cover, and another reason for hope, is that in this particular concession, the deforestation was so bad and the community organizing around it, so not just the Indigenous Dayak people, but local allies. They campaigned and wrote to the government of Indonesia and asked them to step in to get the deforestation to stop. And actually, there was a letter sent from the government to the company telling them to stop clearing. And it was because of forest and other land use. So Indonesia is trying to reduce its climate emissions by reducing land use emissions. And so it was the way the letter was framed is that the company was violating these climate commitments. And so the Indonesian government told this company to stop cutting down forest. So that's extraordinary in and of itself. And the more extraordinary thing is the company eventually listened. And so while the deforestation in this concession is terrible, we're talking like 100,000 acres over the past 4 or 5 years, for now at least it's stopped. And if we can get the RV industry to stop being a market for this timber, it makes it that much more likely that this deforestation will stay stopped and won't be replicated in many other concessions across Indonesia.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book, on YouTube, or subscribe to our weekly newsletter at theoutdoorminimalist.com. For even more updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with the shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.